I'm drinking some juice and then I'm going for it. So,
Juice. What
juice.
kind of juice?
My goth fuel. My G fuel. I paid $35 for it. I'm drinking it. Hey,
I
this is.
paid $35.
You
I'm
know what?
drinking every
This is.
drop of it.
Hear me out. Hear me out. This is a reverse sponsorship. G Fuel. Your goth GF flavor or whatever is awful. All right, you need to go back to the drawing board on that one. Yeah, no, you know what? With that. Hey, welcome to the D12 is underrated. I'm Bard. This is Ryan, and this is Brandon.
Hello.
Howdy.
And I know you guys aren't ready for the conversation about the D12 being underrated, so instead, today we are talking about fantasy tropes. I love fantasy. I think you both love fantasy as well. Fantasy is my bread and butter. It's my thing. I have infinite amounts of bookshelves, and by infinite, I mean they are filling up so quickly I cannot do anything with them anymore. Full of fantasy books, mostly fantasy books. Some sci-fi, but I'm a fantasy guy. And so I wanted to start today's podcast, today's conversation with fantasy tropes that you guys don't like. That you like there's something in a setting that when it comes up it's like, oh, this is classic fantasy and I don't enjoy it at all. Like my big example is orcs being evil. I understand that has been something that has shifted specifically with our generation as we've grown up, like orcs being evil, and that was a big thing because it spawned out of Tolkien and a lot of other folk tales that created where it's like, oh, these orcs are just like barbarian evil bad guys. I don't like that. I love twisting and changing the ideas of like what orcs can be. Like that's my big one.
To that point, I dislike the idea of inherently evil races in general.
Yes, thank you.
Like, be it an orc, goblin, of the monstrous variety. Like, I get some of them may be more, like, hardcore, maybe a lot more, like, violent or things of like that nature. Especially if you consider, like, drow and D&D. Like, that's a pretty violent culture. But, like, even then, I don't like the idea that it's just like, oh, man, it's a drow. We got to kill him because they're a drow, right?
Oh, no. And I like to your point as well about drow, like inherently the species of drow is not just like they're not evil because they're drow. They're evil because of the culture that they're raised up in and the whole lolth thing that goes on in the Forgotten Realms and a lot of that. And I think they're more what's the word I'm looking for? Nurture versus nature kind of argument, right, with drow. And I enjoy that because then you can start playing with ideas like Dritzt or there are drow that I know that live on the surface of Faerun now. And I think technically they've always lived on Faerun. It's been kind of a weird retcon, but you get my point, right? Like there is now different factions of drow of dark elves on Faerun.
Yeah, I believe they're called Seldarine drow, are the ones that are like, we don't have much to do with Lolth and all that jazz.
Yeah, and so it's like, but it's stuff like that. I really enjoy. I like I said, tropes that you don't like. What about you, Ryan? Tropes that you just can't stand in fantasy, books, media, whatever.
For me, it's I'm trying to think of something that's like specifically fantasy, because the thing that comes to mind that I see it happen a lot in fantasy, but necessarily isn't strictly fantasy.
Oh no, it doesn't inherently have to be fantasy. Just
characters failing to grow, or at least their growth gets reset for the sake of drama. So a character goes through some event that ends up kind of growing their character story. They learn things. They generally become better, whether it be a better personality or like better at some skill. And then whoever is writing said books, making said fantasy films, they're like, oh, I need some conflict. It's just going to be the same thing. And it feels like they've just kind of cheapened the growth of that character.
sure, and I feel like that's also just like a general writing thing, though. I feel like a lot of writing you can point to. It doesn't really matter the genre, but like with fantasy, for me. So here's the thing. I go on this spiel probably a lot more than I think I do, but I'm really wrapping it around to the whole inherently troping the way that species are. Elves have to be a certain way, orcs have to be a certain way, drow have to be a certain way. Especially in settings that I've been building for D&D campaigns, I've been pushing back against a lot of these ideas that something has to be a certain way. The god of the sun has to be good. I pushed against that when I created Volar for my setting. Volar is the god of the sun. Volar is evil. Volar is very evil. I kind of made this inspiration of like what if I took someone like a sun god, but they were more like Lucifer Morningstar, and that they in the way that they wanted to try and control people. You know, it pulled from a Christian mythology on that one, right? And like the same with like the god of death, right? Like I took more inspiration from like what if death was more like Chiron in is it Chiron for Greek mythology, where he ferries people across the river Styx, right? Yeah, it's not necessarily that like Charon is evil, right? But he's there to usher people into the next life, into the underworld, to the afterlife. And I thought death obviously is not inherently evil, also something that's changed. And so I like pushing against that, and I don't enjoy when things are like typically the same, right? Like I don't enjoy opening a fantasy book by someone new, or opening up a D&D RPG supplement or any other TTRPG supplement and finding that things are very much just like, oh, I'm playing in Faerun, but this has a different flavor, or I'm playing in Greyhawk and this has a different flavor, or I'm in Glorian and it's just a different flavor, right? Like elves are elves. And I think challenging that, and like obviously there are some different things in Faerun, there are different things in Glorian, right? And I'm not trying to like say that they're not different in ways. It's just very much elves are elves, orcs are orcs, dwarves are dwarves, right? And I like pushing up against that personally. So, and that's not for everyone. When I told my dad, who plays in our Friday game, about Volar, I gave him the supplement for the gods. Dad looked at me, had this like look in his eyes, eyebrow raised, and he's like, "Your god of the sun is evil?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he was like, "Okay." Like,
I was there when he said that. I'm like, you don't think the avatar representing the giant fiery ball in the sky isn't evil?
like I was like, yeah, I wanted to push up against convention. So, you know, it's just that's like my big thing, is it's like pushing up against things that are like traditionally the same in fantasy. I like changing those. They don't always land. I understand they don't always land, but it's still fun to experiment and check them out, you know?
I think for me, especially when it comes to D&D specifically, is not I prefer to kind of make my own character as he goes and not be like, all right, this is going to be the brutish fighter or the horny bard or the tree hugging druid. I kind of like to have them have more of a personality, and they can be fun characters to play from time to time. There's nothing wrong with them inherently, but I think they can stifle creativity, whether that comes from role playing or world building, simply because you're trying to fit a certain class or background or whatever it may be into one niche.
Right. You know, filling the archetype, if you will. Got like really quiet all of a sudden. Okay, so I guess I'll move on. What are the tropes in fantasy that you like? Tropes in fantasy games for TTRPGs that you just love to see? Like, every time it happens, you just gobble it up.
I'm a sucker for those big scenes where they get all the people that they talk to along the way, and they kind of power friendship it out and win.
Oh, yes,
I
the
mean,
power
I
of
know a lot of people
friendship.
joke about power of friendship in lots of games, but I mean, it feels pretty good. And you're like, I remember that guy when this happened, and I remember that guy from when this happened,
I love
and
it.
now we're all together. It never seemed like it would happen, and
Who could have
now
seen this
we can
coming?
win.
I love it. No, I love it. I love the power of friendship. I think I'll die on that hill too. The power of friendship is so fun every time. All right, especially in a TTRPG where it's like your DM starts calling back NPCs from past sessions. You're like, oh my gosh, it's happening. Like things are connecting.
No, it always hits so hard too, right? Like Lord of the Rings, when he's like, and on the third day, look to the east, and then it like, they show up. You're like, oh my gosh, who
Oh,
could have seen this
the
coming?
power of friendship, and Gandalf brought all his friends, and all of
it's,
all of the Rohirrim. Yeah, no, it's oh, I love it. I love it.
it's so good. Like my favorite trope probably has to be just like tavern scenes in general.
Mm,
Like I love it when we wind up at taverns, like books, movies, tabletops. Like I love being at the tavern because it always means like I'm gonna get up to shenanigans. We're probably gonna start a bar fight. Like
yeah, no. So I talked with Dad about this. I see a lot of videos on YouTube in specific, that push against the grain of the idea of you start in a tavern, right? And I just went on a whole spiel, and my argument might sound like a hypocrite when I start this, right? Where it's like I was like, I'm the guy who loves pushing against the grain on a lot of these tropes and stuff. But if there's one trope I love that I absolutely just think is the greatest, it's I start in a tavern. You start in a tavern, all right? You are adventurers, you're weary, you're tired, you have arrived in a tavern in a small town. Why you're all there? Maybe your group has figured that out beforehand. Maybe you're figuring it out as you go. All right. But taverns are like the quintessential delicious home cooked meal of a TTRPG. If someone starts in a tavern, I know it's going to be a banger. I know it's going to be a great time.
yeah, absolutely here for taverns, right? Like every great adventure we've had, taverns.
Tavern starts in a tavern. One of the greatest anthologies for 5th edition, in my opinion, is Tales from the Yawning Portal. That starts in a tavern, and I think has a lot of predominant themes that run through the Yawning Portal, the tavern. I'm pretty sure they also have the Undermountain, Undermountain for 3.5 and Undermountain for 5. I really don't know if there was Undermountain for 4. I haven't looked into like adventure supplements for 4. But like that also starts at the Yawning Portal, right? Another just fantastic kind of tavern setting. And like the Yawning Portal is obviously iconic to Faerun, but you can make taverns iconic. And like I personally have twisted on that recently, where it's like I'm more into the whole Japanese idea of adventuring guilds rather than just taverns, right? But still kind of same flavor, different font kind of thing.
No, that's fair. That's fair. But yeah, big fan of taverns. I think another one I really like doesn't come up quite as much in tabletop, more so in like video games and like you know, movies and literature of that sort is when they have to like go to some sort of like ball, and you're like, oh no, like we're gonna have to go undercover, probably like rescue a princess, maybe do some like
You're a big
spy
fan of the
shenanigans.
dance ball, kind of the big grandiose event kind of thing.
I love that. I eat it up so much. You're like, what do you mean the prince just got murdered at the ball? Like, are you kidding me?
What the frig? Yes.
I eat that up like, oh,
No, yeah, because
chef's kiss.
there really are really iconic scenes with that. The Red Wedding from Game of Thrones.
Mhm.
Vox Machina, when they have the whole fight with the vampire and Percy's backstory at the start of the Briarwood arc kind of thing, right? Like iconic big moments that are just it's good.
Or like Dragon Age Inquisition has a like ball scene too. Like it's so good. I love it.
Yeah, it's a great trope. I love it. I love it. Um, I really like dwarves. I like tinkering with some of the dwarf stuff, but I love the idea that there's a bunch of dudes that just like their whole thing is I want to dig, I yearn for the mines, and I want to build things. And they like every time there's a big conflict or something, they're like, we need to go get the dwarves. The dwarves got to help us, and the dwarves are like, bro, I'm busy mining right now. I love them.
I don't got time
like-
for your politics. I got rocks to find.
I do like how I've seen just in various fantasy areas how dwarves, while they still kind of have like that core like of the earth feel to them, I like the various things I've seen people have differed with them, whether they're specialized in a certain metal like gold, or they just collect everything, or if they're tinkers and engineers, or if they're more like masons and artists. It's been interesting seeing the various takes people have made with dwarves while still keeping that kind of core close to the earth feel.
I agree. Like, I honestly think dwarves, oddly enough, well, I find that their archetype is a lot the same. I always find that every time they come up, they're always a little different in anything that they're put in, right? Whereas like my big beef with elves, and I think a lot of people have like the big beef with elves, is like elves in any setting don't really change. They're very Tolkien-esque, in the woods, live for 1,000 years, pretty slender, uh and I, like
Ah ha ha, brother. But don't forget the anti-trope with elves, which is like my fantasy's different because the elves are actually repressed,
yeah,
be it
because they're repressed,
Elder Scrolls or Dragon Age or
which I always find is too. So I think sometimes it works. I think Dragon Ages can be like was really impactful for me when I first played it, because I played an elf and I was like when you play Dragon Age Origins for the first time and you end up
yeah, the Elf Origin's
like
dark.
the elf origin's super dark. Like it has some really heavy themes about like sexual assault and slavery and abuse and other things, and it has some really powerful moments in it, and it's like it was one of those things where I was like, wow. But I find that I don't always enjoy that, because I feel like that's always the counterbalance with elves, right? It's like either wow, really cool, slender, great, awesome, or it's like Divinity Original Sin also does this too, don't they? Where like the elf gods
Yep,
were like
The
slain,
Witcher
and
also does
like
it.
everyone hates the elves and they're awful. Like like they're the
Well,
worst.
in Divinity, they're like the elves are cannibals and they like gain your memories by eating your flesh, and you're like, excuse me?
Yeah, okay, which like to Larion's credit, right? That's at least it's at least a little different.
That's a little different. You're right. Or like The Witcher, like the elves are technically like interdimensional travelers that like showed up on from the conjunction of spheres, right?
I did not
Or is
know
it the
that
humans that showed up?
actually.
I can't remember.
I don't
Well,
know, but
yeah.
that's interesting. No, I like that. I like that a lot. I know that the elves also kind of get the short end of the stick in The Witcher, right? Um, so you got these two, I think contradicting, or not contradicting, but like these two very much opposed kind of versions of elves, and sometimes I'd like to kind of see them in the middle, kind of like a wood elf. I think is always sometimes pretty good, where it's like, yeah, they're like slender and graceful, but like they live in the trees and they like to eat concrete, and you're like, okay.
I think when people use elves, like Tolkien's elves that live for a really long time, it's very difficult to make it seem reasonable for them to have normal interactions with other races that have a lifespan similar to that of a human. Um, so I think for like if we were to just have them be humanesque, there are some that suck, there are great ones, and they're all in between. I think you'd have to remove that 1,000-year lifetime if they're going to be intermingling with other races.
Right, and something I actually
That's
do like when. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Brandon.
no, didn't mean to interrupt you at all. I was gonna say like I
It's
feel
good.
like the issue with the long river races is they always portray them as like detached. They're like, oh, we live so long, we just don't care about anything because nothing lives as long as us. And I'd much rather see it where like kind of like humans' relations with pets, right? Like a cat only lives like max 15, 20 years, but like I would love to see elves where they're like, this is my pet human Fido. Like I met him adventuring, we're gonna chill for like 100 years. He doesn't live very long, but like he enriches my life while he's here.
I was gonna say, it's like an elf shows up and he's like, "Hi, I'm Tal the Sin, and this is my human friend. His name is Gerp. I love Gerp. I die for Gerp." And Gerp is just like some grumpy old dude, and he's like, "Hey, how's it going?"
See, like that to me is like a much more fun, like, oh, we
See,
live forever sort
see,
of
and
trope.
I've also kind of been I've been thinking about this, right? Like genuinely with elves. Oh, this is turning into an elf episode now. Genuinely with elves. Something
Damn elves, they take over everything.
I've been thinking about, where it's like I think Tolkien. I think the one thing about Tolkien's elves that has always kind of bothered me, and I think it's more from a movie perspective, and it's in the books too, right? Is it's like they live 1,000 years, they destroyed the rings allegedly, and then the elves just kind of pieced out. They don't give a shit. They aren't attached at all, and like they're leaving back for Valinor, right? They're going back to Valinor. Um,
Right. And to be fair, I think Rings of Power portrays it a little better than like Peter Jackson's trilogy of movies, where it's like the elves are like, we have been fighting this war against this damn ring for thousands of years.
I'm
We are
tired.
tired and we want to go home.
And I think I think that works a lot better. And this is my point with the books. And like the Silmarillion also helps with that, which is technically what Rings of Power is, right? Is it's like, I think something that's always bothered me though is I'm going to correct myself and say from the movies is it's just like, it's like the elves seem to be like uber important and involved in stuff. And then it's just like, they never like they help in Helm's Deep, but like the bad ring shows up. They have the ring of power, the one ring of power. Again, the one thing that like, especially in the Peter Jackson films, when Elrond just like lets the king leave, I guess. I've never I've never understood how that one worked before they tossed the ring in the pit. And they're just kind of like, yep, Frodo's got like the most evilest, terriblest ring on the planet. Like, good luck. See you later, right? It's like, I don't know. I feel like, when you're in the end game, you should see it through and then go home. But that's also like I said, I think that also plays to Tolkien's strength of this idea that they're just tired, they're done, they don't really care what happens to Middle Earth. So
I
I'm
think it would be an
pretty tired of.
interesting. I think it'd be an interesting take to kind of have. And this is kind of in vain with like the whole. This is my pet human, but having them be like the stewards of the Earth or whatever planet they're on, like knowing that they're going to see the lives of so many things pass before them, that they want to try and kind of preserve it and make it the best it can be instead of their own petty politics.
yeah, and see, that's something was totally gonna keep going on my thing about the elves thing, and then I just stopped after my Tolkien thing. I've been thinking about elves, right? This idea that it was like originally I had this idea where it was like kind of like the elves in Elric of Melniboné. I know the Melnibonians technically aren't elves, but they're essentially elves, right? Where it's like they become so powerful, so magically inclined that they see a lot of things beneath them, and they end up ruling a good chunk of the earth until they become reclusive. When Elric starts, right? With this idea that is like the elves live for so long and they have so much power. It's like, why wouldn't they rule over everything around them at some point, right? That's one way you can go with it. And then kind of what you said, and something I've been thinking about with my setting I've been working on for our game, is I like the idea that elves are a lot more like druids or like the Vanir from Norse mythology, right? Stewards of the earth, great earth magic kind of people, kind of got more of a Viking-esque kind of culture. And because they live for so long, right? Like they believe in the balance of the world, they believe in the balance of nature and protecting nature and all that. I've always liked the whole elves and nature thing, right? But I think taking it a step farther is always something I've wanted to do. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I feel.
Yeah. Okay. So, like all great writers and DMs and other things, we steal a lot. And when it comes to like fantasy tropes and other things and like pushing against it for your TTRPGs and other stuff, where do you find that you pull the most inspiration from? Are you a fan of like the classic Tolkien kind of fantasy, the medieval kind of Europe-esque feeling fantasy of the original D&D? Maybe you go kind of alien and weird with it, like Brandon Sanderson's Cosmere, or just kind of like what fantasy do you find yourself in terms of fantasy tropes or fantasy worlds that you just would like, that you personally pull from more than others?
When it comes to like a mythos system, I really love Final Fantasies with their kind of soft system where they have Leviathan and Titan and Garuda and Ifrit and the many others, where they all have like a dedicated kind of element to them, but across the games they change. And so I think kind of having that as like a dedicated mythos. I mean, you see in historical mythology, from the Egyptians to the Greeks to the Romans, of the evolution and other civilizations before, during, and after, the evolution of those kinds of pantheons and what they represent. But there's always that kind of core tenet that seems to linger, for what they represent. But I like just kind of the representation that Final Fantasy gives. On that note, and I also like their representation of fantasy mounts. Like chocobos are great. um, being able to ride dogs, and
Dogs.
kind of taking fantasy mounts from a lot of places. I really like the concept of space whales or space amoebas, flying sea creatures, essentially. Um, I think those are very fun to use.
Yeah, to like add on to your Final
Yeah, go
Fantasy
ahead.
thing really quick. I agree with you. I think the one thing I love about Final Fantasy has always been this like mix of technology and fantasy. Like their aesthetic is very uniquely Final Fantasy. Uh and I love that. I love it. I love the way it looks, and I love that because you brought up the mythos, the things with like Ifrit, the gods and the magic and Aether and stuff like that. That never changes, but where we put that in a setting does, right? Where it's like Final Fantasy 16 is very much a classic kind of fantasy feeling world, right? Whereas like Final Fantasy 7 is kind of a cyberpunk steampunk kind of feeling game that's very much more futuristic, but it's still got a lot of the rules of Final Fantasy, and that those wildly different, but are still familiar at the same time, and I love it. I love it. I love Final Fantasy.
Amazing.
I know I personally
That's-
love. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Right.
I was gonna say I also like to I like kind of meshing ideas, and I kind of got that idea from Chronicles of the Imaginarium Geographica by James Owen, where he in his books takes a lot of bits and pieces from various worlds. So some from Narnia, some from Lord of the Rings, some from even like the Bible, some from the Legends of Camelot. Um, just like takes a whole bunch from a whole bunch of different worlds of real life histories and mythos and a lot of fantasy stories, and kind of plays with them to see how they would interact using their unique rules. Um, and whenever I'm trying to develop some kind of story, whether it be a DMing or something else, I always find it fun to kind of introduce one idea with an idea from a separate universe and see how the players interact with those two.
Yeah. Yeah. No. I'm totally with you there. I love seeing how that meshes, right? How that feels, and especially when you throw in something that you're like, maybe this won't work, because like it doesn't feel right, but you're like, yeah, but it does, it's fantasy world, it totally does.
Pulls out a gun.
No, he's like, hey, that is a whole gun. Which like guns are always ones that I think are really interesting with fantasy worlds, right? Because like again, Final Fantasy, there's a lot of characters that end up with like guns at some point. They're always kind of unique in the way that they work, right? But you know, fantasy with D&D and stuff, they normally go with the like flintlock-esque kind of
Yeah.
firearm.
And I think they usually work as like as long as you stick to like they're really rare, right? Like
Yeah,
for example, like Vox Machina I think works because like Percy is like one of the few people that runs around with like a flintlock weapon, right?
right. And you know, there's a I don't want to like I don't know. It's a 10-year campaign, 10-year-old campaign, older than that, right? Like
Sure, but the show's kind of newer,
I was
so
gonna
there's
say I think
newer
I'm allowed
fans
to.
coming in.
Okay, I'll give a spoiler warning. Spoiler warning for
Vox Machina.
Vox Machina. I think they also play with that idea really well because obviously a lot of Percy's guns and things like that. Those ideas came from the demon Ornyx. Ornyx. I want to say it's Ornyx that he has with
Something
him.
like that.
And when it jumps to the other lady,
His master.
yeah, it just jumps to
Well,
another
not like
lady.
his master is like tutelage lady.
She worked for his family. That's about as much as I remember at the moment. But like, she threatens to start mass producing guns, right? Which they then deal with the ramifications of like what would a world with, you know, guns like that work with, right? And I don't think that comes to pass, but it's still an interesting idea and concept to play with, where it was like, what if we took a fantasy world full of high magic and all that other stuff, and then like everybody suddenly had guns, and the wizard wasn't quite as cool because his fireball is not nearly as fast as this really awesome 9mm pistol.
Wizard's like, I'm gonna burn your face, and he's like, what if I shot you in the face, Mr. Wizard?
just like some cowboy spinning his guns. He's like, I'd like to see you try, book boy.
We'll see who draws faster.
Draw. And starts shooting him with the revolver. I think obviously I think we steal from everywhere. I steal from everywhere. We take from everywhere. But when it comes to like world settings and all that, I think it's sometimes a lot harder to steal. And make it feel somewhat natural, right? And so I guess my question for you is like when you introduce something that you feel doesn't quite work or doesn't quite feel right for the world, do you just remove it or do you try to tinker with it and make it work and kind of just hope that your players forget about what you did with it or something else, right? Or like, you just tell your group like, hey, this changed, right? Which I've been doing a lot in my campaign recently because a lot of things are being built as we're playing, because I've said this multiple times and this is always just good advice. Don't wait until your world is perfect. Don't wait until your world is where you want it. Just start playing and filling in the blanks as you go. But still, my question is like, are there things you've introduced world side in terms of where you've stolen from places and where you get influences from and like they just haven't worked and you like, what'd you do with it?
I'm gonna have to defer to you and Ryan on this one because, like, at least as like a DM, I prefer like hard written, like give me Faerun or give me Galarian. Like all the world building is already done. I'm just using it and adding in spots as I see fit.
Sure. All right. No,
And
no,
so for the most part, like
that's fair.
adding new things like isn't hard for me.
You're yucky. You like pre-written adventures that all the work is done for you and your life is beautiful and easy and you have so much fun.
Exactly. And then it's like I just homebrew the parts that I think are interesting.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah. So I guess to Ryan, like, there have been things you put in a game where you're just like, ooh, shouldn't have done that. In terms of like world, not items, right? So we talked about that last week.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I think I've had bits where it's like clashed a little bit just because there was something I really wanted to put in. But it wasn't anything like it straight didn't work. It was just a little bit of a tone shift. For better or for worse. There was a campaign I ran with some friends to kind of cheat this idea. It was a short campaign. We knew we didn't have it was like summer after graduation and people were going to be going everywhere after the summer. So we were doing a very short-term campaign. And so to kind of, one, work with that shorter time frame, and then two, also kind of have just, I can throw in whatever. I took inspiration from the idea in the first book in the Five Kingdoms series by Brandon Mole, where there's basically it's called a cloud wall in the book, and these castles come out of it, and they have various different traps and treasures and people inside of them that only exist while this castle's floating from one side of the cloud wall to the other. And the people that work in this cloud wall, their job's to try and raid those and get loot, and a lot of it goes back to this company that runs it, and they sell it. And so I made a pretty similar method, but instead of it being floating castles, I had a range of caves. So there was this one central cave that had offshoots coming off of it, and they would be given a very, very vague hint on what would be in there, based on what was like plastered outside the cave, and the cave would spontaneously generate this, whatever the quote unquote hint was. It was meant to be pretty vague. But depending on what they chose, they would have a short dungeon or adventure, and then I could jump to something else that totally didn't fit the next session, but it would make sense in the context of this world of being, it can generate anything. So for one moment you could be in a alien labyrinth, and then the next you could be in a medieval town. And so I kind of cheated that idea a little bit, just because I'm like, there's a lot of small niche ideas I want to use that don't really fit into a larger campaign, so this is kind of my chance to do so.
No, honestly, it's a good idea. I really like it. Kind of got like a roguelite drop in, drop out, just fun kind of feel to it, right?
Mhm.
And I think it just sounds fun. This idea, kind of like a West Marches campaign, right? Like we live on the edge of this area, and there's just only west. You can only go west, and west has a bunch of really cool and interesting things, and you go where you please, do what you please, kind of thing, and just kill monsters, get loot, kind of thing. And I love that. So, I think that's a good example of just, especially because like you're able to just change it on the fly, you know. The big example I can think of for me in terms of stealing from stuff was so I probably say this every episode. I really like homebrewing my campaigns. I like writing my own games, and sometimes they don't always work out, right? But it's like, and it's a lot more work as a DM, right? Which is why I was saying to Brandon, like, I get it. I get doing pre-written adventures. I think they're great. I love them, but I personally find a lot of joy as a DM doing all of it by hand, right? Which, you know, if that's what you like, that's what you like. But the problem is when I do that, sometimes I have been put in positions to be a DM when I probably really didn't have the time, and I just volunteered because I'd prefer to DM, I think, which is not the norm, right? So like the big one I can think of is we played the couple weeks ago. We talked about a story where Brandon and I were in a game where I lost all control, right? That was set in Faerun. The map was Faerun. I don't think the rest of the campaign was. And it started to show when I just started throwing things in for the world or other stuff, and everyone at the table who had been playing the game since the 80s just kind of looked at me and was like, that's not Faerun, bro. That's not in Faerun. Like they were very aware of like certain cities and other stuff that I thought were kind of esoteric when I went and looked into them, and I could do as that. And they were like, actually, there's lore for that, right? And so I'd have to start tweaking things on the fly, which, you know, most people, I don't think will call you on that, but sometimes you get people that are just like, actually, bro, that didn't happen in Waterdeep.
That's fair. I have a little bit of advantage running in Pathfinder because none of our table is that intimately familiar with it, you know?
Sure. Right. And I think
so. Like, I can tweak the lore a little bit, and nobody's gonna be like, "Bro, I'll actually have you know the Brevoy and Restov are one separate nations who were forced to become a single nation." You're like, "Okay, bro, chill out."
Yeah. No. And it's one of those things that I just think is like with lore and stuff like that. I find that when I start tweaking things in worlds people are familiar with, I get called out more as a DM, and at this and I totally understand that, right? Because it's like maybe I gloss over something that's like really important and replaced it with something because I didn't do as good of research as I probably should have. I get that. That's a problem.
And you bring up fair points because like when you were running the Star Wars campaign set in the Mandalorian Wars, I was frequently having to be stop myself from being like, "That's not actually lore."
Yes,
accurate,
I know
brother.
you did it to me a lot, and if I'm gonna be real, I was kind of getting annoyed. I'm just kidding. I'm really not worried.
I was gonna crash out. He's like, "I changed the Mandalorian like armor, and you're over here like."
Yeah. So I think my last question, it really comes down to player characters here. There is a lot of tropes for player characters and a lot of other things, and one of the pieces of advice that my dad gives that I don't like, well, I actually don't think dad's is terrible. I'm still gonna say it because I'm pretty sure dad's given it to me a few times, right? It's like take a character from fantasy that you really like, or a character from a story that you really like, and build them in D&D, right? Like play that character, make that character in D&D. I hate that piece of advice because not only does it play into tropes, but a lot of game systems are not built for you to play someone like Legolas at a first level, right? A lot of games are not built for you to be Wolverine from the X-Men. And so is there like character tropes in D&D that you see people kind of frequently fall into that you're like, you know, I really don't want you to do that? And once again, I'm bagging on elves because it's like when someone says, you know, I want to play an elf ranger, almost always, especially if they're a new player or other things, the DM is going to be like, oh, so you want to play like Legolas or something? And it's like, don't set your player up for that expectation though, right? Or like I want to play like Aragorn from Lord of the Rings. I'm really bagging on Lord of the Rings tonight, apparently. Because I just don't think characters are going to play that way, right? Because it's a fantasy game with rules and other things. So
So
what character tropes? Yeah,
not to like push back against your comments, brother. Like I don't think the advice is half bad. I just think people fail in its execution.
that's fair.
And what I mean by
That's
that
valid.
is like, for example, if you're like, I want to play Wolverine, like if you try to literally translate Wolverine into D&D, like that's gonna fall flat on its face because then you have to introduce the ideas of like mutants and bone claws and adamantium. Like none of that fits in a fantasy setting, right?
Right.
But if you take like the essence of Wolverine, which is like maybe I am a fighter who has had like a really horrific like backstory. He was betrayed by the government or task force that he was working for, and has gained amnesia from these horrible experimentations they performed on him. Like that's still Wolverine, right?
No, see, but I guess I phrased myself badly, right? Because it's like I do not take issue with the personality part, right? Take personality from characters you like, that works. It's the actually literally trying to play them kind of thing that I
Right.
don't enjoy, right?
And I guess that's what I'm trying to say, because like not to bag on like Levi, for example, but he's trying to play like a wee free man like exactly as is in the campaign. And I'm like, I'm not against the idea, but like you need to take those concepts and then translate it to what you're actually playing in, right?
Sure.
If you
And
just try to lift and shift like everything into it, now you're just getting this weird hodgepodge of like suddenly I'm beholden to rules that like I didn't know of because you didn't convey that this came from whatever source material you're
well,
pulling from.
sure. And I think that's been my big problem with that character in particular is he took this thing from a book that we all really love. The problem is Brandon hasn't read it, and that's a lot of legwork for a DM to do, to have to read an entire book just for one person's character to be able to play with that character's ideas rather than taking the spirit of the Wee Free Man. And
Right.
I
And
guess
so it's
that's
like I'm fine with the part of like I'm a fae, I like drinking and fighting and robbing and all that jazz. Like I think that works great and translates in. But when you start trying to drag in like, oh, I'm beholden to like a witch and she has all these rules and all this other jazz, I'm like, we're going a little too far into like bringing the literal character in, right?
sure. What about you,
Anyways,
Ryan? Character tropes, D&D class tropes, I guess, that you're not a huge fan of.
Um, for me, at least when I'm a DM, I like to try and encourage my players to think outside the box. Not that I'm always successful at that, but that's the ideal. And so I can sometimes get a little frustrated when players, and even players that I'm playing with when I'm not the DM, kind of just always go to neutral, um, where they kind of role play, but it's not really anything. And I get that some people don't like role play, and I can't really rag on people for that. But it's something I prefer to see because it gives me something to work with, both as a DM and a player. But also it makes things more interesting. I feel like the people that tend toward neutral is they'll just like they'll hit the thing when they're in combat and they'll keep hitting it and then they're done. There's no kind of maneuvering around for strategy or trying to incorporate variety. And when they're in role play or any situation where they need to react to something, it's kind of just the same things over and over again. I want to try and encourage players to add that variety, and then they kind of just fall into the I don't know, like it's like you're going through the motions of life, but you're
Sure.
playing a game.
So
This is your chance to spice it up.
so I'm gonna say something controversial, I guess, to your comment about I get that some people don't like role playing, right? Uh, I I am totally fine. And obviously I gotta preface this. It is fine if you do not want to do the silly character voice and be in character all the time, right? But it's in the name. TTRPG, tabletop role playing game, right? If you show up with your generic fighter and you're basically just playing yourself and you don't ever interact with the game, the story that the DM puts forward, or you basically have the exact same reaction every time and you're basically just playing yourself, I find that maybe you need to spice it up. Maybe you need to like really sit down and like think to yourself like, how would this character actually do it rather than just not, right? And that's just an addendum to what you said, because I think inherently it's a role-playing game. You got to play a role, right? You can't just play yourself with a sword. Because if I wanted to play myself with a sword, I'd learn how to use a sword.
Yeah, I mean, like, I feel like there's two, I don't want to call them like competing ideologies. There's like two ends of the spectrum where one is it's like, I am fully the character, right? At all times, I am Bong Joon or whatever character I'm playing. And at all times, like, that's how I'm going to behave and do things. And then on the other side, you have like people that are like, this is kind of a social hour. You know, I'm showing up to hear some, do some stuff with my friends. We might roll some dice and kill some things.
Sure. And not to also be fair, there is no problem if your favorite way of playing is jump into a dungeon, kill a bunch of things, get loot, don't really interact and roleplay or anything. That's totally fine. I have found that as I have gotten older, I don't enjoy that style of play. I like the roleplay aspect. I like the talking, the intrigue, the other thing. And like, yeah, you have to roll dice for it, but it's a shared story. I like the shared story aspect, and I always find myself relatively frustrated when I am not getting to participate in creating a shared story. I'm just being dragged along to kill things. So,
No,
I
and
think
that's very fair. Like, to be clear, like, I tend to fall way more on the role playing side. So,
oh no, I totally agree. Right,
which, like, to like standard player tropes, like, admittedly, I tend to fall into the trap of like the characters I find interesting. All like, sure, the flavor might be different of like I'm playing a bard or a monk or whatever, but like they're all kind of chaos goblins. That's just what interests me.
sure. And for me, like I struggle. I don't enjoy the Chaos Goblin most of the time. To an extent, Ryan can totally call me a liar to my face for this one. But I find at least when we start campaigns, I tend to make characters, excluding Bjorn right now. I'd say excluding Bjorn, right? I try to make heroic characters. At least recently, I've been trying to make heroic characters that want to do heroic things and be good guys, and I always fail and end up having to play something different. So,
now, when I envision Chaos Gremlin, I envision something that's they're going to be crazy, but you don't know what they're going to do. When I look at Bjorn, he's more, yeah, he's kind of crazy, but you know how he's going to react to a situation
there's a
most of the
method to
time.
the madness.
Yeah. I have two things. One, I think roleplay also just comes down to the group, right? Like that should be something that's discussed when you're forming a group or when
Very
you're
true.
adding people to a group. Like
Very true. Session zero, very important.
how
Do
is
session zeros.
yeah.
Zeros.
Um, and the other was going to be, I think it's also just difficult sometimes because, at least for me, sometimes however I'm feeling that day can seep in to whatever it is I'm playing as. And my characters don't usually tend to be too crazy. I can think of my one gnome that wanted explosions all the time. But besides him, they're never like super out there. And that's just kind of my nature as like a person anyways.
Right.
But I think that's just one thing to consider is like sometimes you just come into a session and you're like, either I'm fed up with the world and so I'm gonna be a little more chaotic today, or I'm just not feeling it, so I'm gonna be a little bit more neutral today. I think that's also something
But
to
yeah, and
consider.
mood totally affects it, right? But it's like, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Like I said, I always really like playing. I like playing heroic good guys. I like playing guy in armor with big sword that wants to do good in the world. Maybe he's a mercenary, other things. And I find with our groups in particular, I don't get to play that very often. So,
To be
Yeah, for
fair, I
me,
am trying really hard to let you have that character in our Saturday campaign, right?
so this is probably a bad time to tell you, Brandon, that I'm probably giving up Queen once we're done with this arc.
No, don't
I
say that.
am finding I'm having less and less fun as the game is going on with the character because of the group we're playing with. Not a problem, not a
Well,
knock on
we
our
can
group.
discuss that off podcast.
Like I said, not a knock with our group or anything. It's just I am finding that the character idea that I had is not gelling, and I don't want to continue trying to make it work. Right? Which
Fair
that
enough.
happens. That's a whole thing.
I
What a. Sorry, go
I
ahead.
think it's I'm thinking of my character in Roger's campaign right now, where he started kind of, he's a little bit quieter. He was wanting to be a lot more kind of formal. Uh, and then all of a sudden, like the group is like, "You are now Moose Man." He's an
Moose
Alcitar, which is just a moose
Man.
flavored centaur. And I'm like, how is he going to react to this? Because he's like, "No, I have a name, and no one has ever used it."
You know what?
Um,
I'm so surprised that people followed in, because that was like one of the quirks I gave Bjorn, right? Was he doesn't
mhm.
use people's names, he uses descriptions for who they are, right? The fact that people follow suit on that is, it's been funny and kind of weird, right? Because it's like, that's just a quirk. He doesn't use names, he uses descriptions. Moose Man,
Mhm.
Tree Hugger, Witch Lady. Um, I don't know. It's just a weird thing, but yeah, Moose Man.
But also he's like just in the position in the world he's in. He's seen already just a whole lot of people just kind of letting crap happen because either it doesn't affect them or it benefits them, and he's just kind of dejected at the moment. And so where he started as like a very upstanding person wanting to improve, wanting to be very formal, at this point in the campaign it's just kind of like, bro, I kind of am losing my ability to care. There's just so much crap going on, and no one seems to care that my efforts feel in vain.
Sure. Yeah, it's an interesting game for sure. So I think it I think if there's one thing I can give him, it is that it has pushed at least me and you for sure, that I can speak for. It's like our characters in interesting in different ways from the tropes they would normally be in. So, because that's just how it is. Does anyone else have anything else before we end for tonight? This eclectic kind of odd episode,
Name a load.
Ryan.
Nope.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. If you got this far, I love you. You deserve a smooch. This has been the D12 podcast. If you enjoyed what you heard, hit like and subscribe, and maybe leave a comment with your thoughts on fantasy tropes that you loved, fantasy tropes that you hate, and fantasy tropes that you just are ambivalent on. I'm Bard, and I will see you next week.